Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. Electrifying!
Yes, guys, and welcome to another podcast at the Cannon Podcast with yours truly, George V _AFC, and my fellow nerd, my fellow friend, my best buddy in this whole entire soccer world, Mr. Rohan Jivan. How are you, good sir?
Very good, mate. Kind of just in that period where I'm not letting transfers and any saga ruin my mood, just enjoying the summer. And for me, it's cricket season. So like I'm invested in the cricket. And then there's Wimbledon coming up soon as well, the tennis. So yeah, I'm good. I'm good. And enjoying the heat
Mate,
as well.
You say that you're not involved in a saga. However, probably one of the most important sagas that we have covered here on the Cannon Podcast, exclusive, has been your laptop saga. This is pretty big news for me and you. We don't change our technology often.
Yeah, honestly, like for me, we were speaking off air about it. I am that type of guy in which I don't go for the new releases, in which like every year you get a new big release, whether it's a phone or laptop. I'm an Apple guy, so I'll be the MacBook Pro, MacBook Air, or an iPhone. And I'm just not in that boat of getting it for the sake of getting it. I'm very much of the idea where I've got my iPhone and I'll use it until I physically cannot use it anymore and it is just absolutely dead. And my MacBook Pro, that has came basically to a situation where it's on its last legs. And I made the executive decision to go, do you know what? It's time to fork out bit of cash on a new MacBook, and it's in the process. It's deal has advanced, negotiations are finalized. It's just now the medical, and you know, if the medical doesn't pass, then we'll go back to square one. But it looks like next week with the main podcast with all three of us back, all three of us together, it should be there. So yeah, for the time being, I'm using my brother's work laptop.
You guys, you heard it here first. It's here we go on the Apple product from Mr. Rohan Jivan. But something that isn't transfer related that did get released was fixtures, mate. You know, everybody is in silly season, but you know, the one thing that we have to look forward to as far as confirmed is some of those fixture lists. And I don't know, I kind of wanted to get your idea about this whole panic that was seen, for sure. I mean, there was a lot of people that saw our schedule, and undoubtedly the first month and a half, 2 months are difficult. Like there's no getting around that. And, but I mean, I don't know, like, I mean, I kind of wanted to speak on it. Like for me, surely, right? If you're going to play a difficult game, the game isn't changing, right? Like going to St. James Park is going to suck. When do you want that? January, February, March, April, May. It's going to suck either way. You're getting poked at the doctor's office. Just because you close your eyes or you want to whistle or you want to do whatever you want to do to deal with it ain't going to stop that needle going into your arm. It's coming. So from your perspective, you know, are you worried about having that off the jump? Do you see it as a benefit? Do you care about fixtures in general? Like when they come out, are you one of those fans that are like, oh my God, this run-in decides the season. This run of fixtures decides this. Or do you like block up certain segments?
Yeah.
How do you approach the fixture release?
Yeah, personally for me, I get quite excited for fixture day. I think some people of the mindset in which it's very in your words, well, in your word, Yurda, in my word, Yudar, where it's like people will say you play everyone twice. It doesn't matter when you play them. But actually, for me, I think it's actually very important in terms of when you play certain teams. And I think there's a lot more to it. Like, for example, you wouldn't want to go to Anfield. You wouldn't want to go to St. James's Park right in the dying embers of the season. Because in that period, if you're looking to compete on all fronts, it's the Champions League and the FA Cup that's going to be sandwiched in between that period of the season. So I do think it has an important factor in terms of deciding key moments. Now, ultimately, you can't predict when a season is going to be defined specifically, right? But at baseline, before ball is kicked, for me, I look at three clusters, and it's the beginning, the middle, and the end. The beginning is the first 5 or 6 games. The middle is the Christmas period, the festive period. And then the end is the last 4, 5/6 games, the dying embers. And for me, that's the games I really look at and analyze. And so far, there's no two ways about it. It's a very difficult start, right? And I think there's two sides of the coin here. Now, for me, see, I'm a little bit of a wuss, right? The first game, I really like that first game to be a nice home game, sunny at the Emirates. Basically, our last 2 seasons where we played Forest and we played Wolves. Really nice opening day fixtures to really get yourself going. And then the second game, I'm all for it being a really, really hard game. All for it. Because then I go in towards how you think about it, where if you are going to play the big teams, especially away from home, you rather do it early on when everyone is in a similar kind of boat where they're not going to be firing on all cylinders. There might be the chance there, like for example, 22-23 Arsenal. I think that for me was our best pre-season. You know, we got early business done. We were able to get Zinchenko in, Jesus in, and with Saliba coming back, making his, he was stamping his authority in the Arsenal team. Then the Ben White transition, we were set. We were set going into that first game against Crystal Palace. Then we went on to play Leicester, Fulham, Aston Villa, etc. And we were really, really strong. And that's why we were able to accumulate 50 points in the first 19 games. I think that pre-season really set us to have a really promising start. But overall, usually teams do start a little bit slow, and I'd rather play the big teams early on. So from that perspective, yes, it is daunting. Yes, going to Anfield, going to St. James's Park is not easy in your first 5 or 6, let alone going to Old Trafford away from home as well. Because I think with Manchester United, you know, when you look at the Manchester United as of today, it looks like a walk in the park. But there's always something with the Old Trafford, you know, the whole idea of Old Trafford and it being the first big game of the season and a 4:30 kickoff on Super Sunday. But I think for me, like the way I do look at it in positive light is, as you've alluded to, the fact that the games, these tough games, we're getting St. James's Park done early, we're getting Anfield done early. That's great. The Christmas period is actually very, very good for us because we stay local. Pretty much, barring 2 games, I think it's Aston Villa and Everton. So that for me is key. Traveling a lot during the festive period is not ideal, and I think these soft factors are not spoken about enough. And that's why I look at that period of the season, going into it, I'm thinking that's good. And then the run-in is very favourable. Now, like if you look at it, we obviously play Manchester City, we obviously play Newcastle, but we're playing Newcastle at home, and Man City's at the Etihad. But if you look at our fixtures from April, I'd say I think like end of March onwards, they're really favourable on paper. And if Arsenal can be in a position to fight for something, we should fancy our chances there. So basically, I'd say difficult start, but on the positive side, you know, we're playing the big teams on these big grounds and getting them done early. Then the Christmas period and then the final stretch, the dying embers. I look at those 2 periods as really positive for us. So yeah, that's where I stand.
Yeah, I'm caught in like a couple minds here because I don't understand the panic purely because I look at it from a perspective, regardless of the first day of the season or not, right? I look having your most difficult games first as factually more recoverable. If you do perform poorly, forgetting the records right now, if you do, you have the rest of the season to make up that point loss, point total. I mean, Manchester City have shown it in every single one of their major dominant wins. I mean, they traditionally don't start as barnstorming as they carry on. And then from November onwards, they go on ridiculous runs. And it helps to have easier fixtures along the way that you can achieve those points in. So for me, whether or not you have tough fixtures or not, doesn't really bother me from a recovery standpoint if it goes bad. Then from like another perspective, I'm thinking to myself, hold on a second. If you're cold, right? As a team, and every team in the world is cold, doesn't it make sense to have a really big game to get yourself up for it? Like if you're ever feeling lazy, right? And you're ever feeling like a procrastinator, you've got a whole big deadline happening. Are you not more likely to really put your effort in, even if you don't want to, if the deadline's tomorrow or in a week from now? Yeah. Right? So you know the stress is coming, but to me, to go to Old Trafford, every player, I don't care what phase they're in, Old Trafford, I'm looking at that on my calendar. That's something that I'm looking at. Anfield, I'm looking at it. And, you know, from also just a psychological perspective, I think it forces the club, who, by the way, are in a season to really focus on getting silverware. Like, I think that's going to dominate the podcast tone. That we're at a point, barring some unbelievable context, and even then, there are going to be demands for trophies. And in order to really do that, you have to have a mindset from day one that I'm going to kill people. It has to be ruthless. And you almost, you give yourself the best chance of that when you have like a big fight coming up. You get yourself mentally prepared regardless, and you don't need the extra motivation. And so I look at it from that lens and think, brilliant. Then I just factually think, mate, why are we as Arsenal fans in the last 2 years who have had the best top 6 record starting to fear top 6 matches? I mean, I hate to be like a little bit of a nerd there, but I mean, we have been phenomenal against top 6 teams for a while now. And, you know, this idea of like fearing the collection of them, I get it. But really, Arsenal have failed in the games outside the top 6 in pretty much most of the times that we've wanted to succeed. If you wanted to talk about Aston Villa in the run-in 2 years ago, if you wanted to talk about last year, I think our period again, when we collectively lose bounces of 3 or 4 matches that on games that we should be winning, are our downfall in Christmas period or in other periods in the season. Like we have clusters of losses against teams that we should not be losing to. And those are the ones that I think frustrate me, but I don't worry about your Anfields, your Old Traffords, your St. James Park, your Etihad. Those are games that I think that the team typically in the last 2 to 3 years has always stood up in. Now, have we always got the result in some of those grounds? No. Some of them are historically more difficult than the others. Absolutely. But they're games that are competitive and they're won on margins. I think the games that frustrate me the most are the Fulhams, are the West Hams, are your Southamptons with Ramsdale, are your Aston Villas. Like those frustrates me because then I'm like, okay, I do know that on paper I'm superior. On the day when I face a big top 6 team that's up for it, a St. James Park that's rocking, they're a good challenge. And if they lose or we drop points, I can sit there and say, okay, drop points lost or gained. Whereas when I look at a Fulham, I go, no, that's points dropped. There's no reason that I shouldn't be beating Fulham in a calendar year, for example, or something crazy like that. You know, we've been guilty of doing that to certain teams. So from my perspective, I look at the fixtures, I get excited. I think that this is exciting for me. I look at the Old Trafford and I think for a season that's going to be dominated by the headline, win a trophy and a major trophy, you need to start strong. And it needs a tough opponent. Like it needs, don't mess around. We're going to Old Trafford mentality. And that needs to be the case that we carry through the rest of the season. And I do think starting with strong opponents gets us in the mind frame that we're forced to get warm early. You know, everyone's going to be coming cold from it. And by having such strong opponents, you're going to train harder. You don't need the extra motivation from a coaching perspective. Players are just naturally saying, shit, we're going to St. James Park. I got to run a bit more.
And the other thing as well, George,
or whatever.
And the other thing, just to go on to that point that you're making about, you know, starting strong. And for me, like you said, when we're looking at Manchester City under Pep Guardiola, if you go and look at the Premier League titles that they have won, consistently, it is in the second half of the season where they really get into gear, and that's where they blow teams away. Like, don't get me wrong, they still have a very strong first 19 games, but honestly, go and look at every single season. It's the last 19 games, the last 20, 21 games in which you see Manchester City in this inevitable fashion of being able to get over the line. Like, we saw it in 23-24. And I know I get clowned for this lot, but Arsenal operated at 100-point pace January onwards. And Manchester City operated at 102-point pace from like late December onwards, and that was the driver there in terms of them getting over the line. Now, Arsenal, the best start that they've had under Mikel, and I've already mentioned it, is the 22-23 season where we managed to accumulate 50 points in the first 19 games. And for me, what was the catalyst to that? And I've already alluded to it. It was the early business that we did, and we knew what we were going to get from Arsenal. Everybody knew it, you know, and I think maybe these tough fixtures as well incentivizes the club to do early business as well and to really start the season, which we have the group of players that we know we're going to be playing with for the remainder of the season. I mean, obviously there's certain deals that will be more difficult to do. Like, I think because as you mentioned, there's a lot on Arsenal winning something major this season. We'll go into next season because there was the expectation last season that we would do it, where if Manchester City didn't do it, it'd be Arsenal. That's what the mindset was from not just Arsenal fans, but from fans of other clubs as well, because they knew what Arsenal were doing. They knew that they were getting closer and closer. But now I think the pressure piles on even more because of, you know, we spoke about it in terms of the context, the external factors, but it's going to be a lot more difficult for people to stomach those external factors this season. And that's why I think, for me, these hard fixtures at the start, not only is it good to get them done, but also, and obviously the top 6 record as well, but also to get early business done, to allow new players to come in and to have the preseason. Because a lot of the players that we've signed over the years, look at Declan Rice as well, they mention about the information that they have to carry and they have to take on board. Like, it's good for them to have that information in preseason and in games that have no jeopardy, and then we can start strong, and we've got the players, the group of players that will be with us for the whole season.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely want to tie up this topic in that sense, because there's going to be so much analysis by paralysis next year. Already I felt we had this last year, and already we were fighting that urge. It's going to be a completely different. It's going to be title or not with every post-match reaction. And I'm prepping for that. And so the best way that, I can deal with that, by the way, and I think the players know it too, mate. Like, there's just been some like post-match and even post-season interviews that lead me. It's not as though the players don't see it. And I mean, some of the people that have been there the longest, I'm talking about your Gabriels, who we'll talk about a little bit later, just getting an extension, or the new guys in Miles saying, listen, mate, like, we know the demands are a trophy at this point. Like, that squad, I think they themselves, you don't have to tell them, they feel that they've deserved a Premier League with their performances over the last 2 to 3 years. They feel that they've earned that respect. And to not get it is going to be more frustrating on them than it is us, even though that we are fans and we're so passionate. But like, mate, like, they're in it, like, sometimes I have to step back even myself, and I just try to get that emotional toll across to fans, because, mate, like, these guys are competitors. Like, I don't think people understand what it takes to become a professional athlete on, the commitment level and, the intensity and the mental fortitude it takes to get over the line and make a legacy. We celebrate it as fans. We go back and we rejoice. We make you heroes. We put you on a platform. But, mate, these are the guys that are really in the guts, receiving the spear to the face, the elbows. They're the ones doing it, right? We rejoice and we celebrate them, or we kill them and hate them for not achieving the goals, but they're in it. Like, I think sometimes we do undersell that aspect. They're in it to win. And, if the job is to succeed, if you fail, they don't not take it personally because they earn a boatload of money. I mean, from their perspective, mate, they don't see the bank account. You know what they see? Christmas time, I'm not seeing my family, I'm training. And, I don't know, just a daily decision. I'm not going to go out with friends because I've got a big game coming up. Now, not everybody's like that. Some people live the high life when they're in it. Not everybody is in that mentality. But on a fundamental level, these guys are all competitors. And at some point in their life, they made the decision to commit to this life. And I just think that they take it a lot more seriously than we give them credit for. And they have to. So that's all to say that I think this season's a big one. It's going to be a big one in which I think that we're hoping for change. And on the back of that change, I'm going to transition into one of our transfer topics on the pod. Mate, Martin Zubimendi going to be really changing the midfield. I did want to talk a little bit about it, mate, because we've done a couple scouteds at this point. I've talked with Alex a lot about Martin Zubimendi, and I think we've talked about in group chats a bit. And have you got a chance to watch him? That's the first question.
Absolutely, yeah. Because a lot of people on the Cannon podcast are like, "Oh, Rohan, here's another play he's not watched." Sorry, I've not watched it. Like, got a full-time day job as well. There's not that many hours in the day to dissect. But I have watched Zubimendi in depth.
Okay,
as
brilliant.
Well, so
Brilliant. So I would love to have a little bit of a nerd fest for the next 5-10 minutes about Martin Zubimendi, what he offers, and what we can look to change. So it's going to lead into another segment down in the pod, because there are certain things we won't change as a club. But Martin Zubimendi, what will he change, in your opinion, in midfield?
Quite a lot. Quite a lot, I think. So it's interesting because I think this, for me, is a player, and when the links surfaced around about January, where that was like when we knew Zubimendi to Arsenal seemed there was a lot of legs to it. I think it was Sambi Mokbul who actually broke the news. Who's a fantastic journalist. And when I watched a couple of Zubimendi games there, it was only two, I didn't really feel this level of enthusiasm and this excitement where my mindset was very much, I like Zubimendi, I don't love him. But then as I watched more games, and I watched more and more of him for Spain in particular, because for Spain, that's where you're going to be able to see the transferable qualities more relative to Real Sociedad. And that's where I've started to get a lot more excited. And, you know, shock. Getting more information, watching more games allows you to change your opinion. Didn't know you could do that. But, yeah, I think for me, like, what Zubimendi will offer for Arsenal, and I actually felt that we improved on this last season, but obviously with what happened and the frustrations, as we've already mentioned, in terms of not winning anything, people don't really care about those things. But I felt Arsenal's ability to play through pressure against high-pressing teams was improving. And it improved a lot last season, where I'd say it was Arsenal's most impressive campaign playing against high-pressing teams and going through pressure. Now, people will say 22-23, but 22-23, teams did not prepare for what Arsenal were doing, and they defended Arsenal in a completely different way. Last season, everybody knows what Arsenal are. When you get good, this is not just with Arsenal. This remains ubiquitous in football, where the top teams then the opposition start to analyze you in depth and look for weaknesses. So for me, that's where I felt like against some of these pressing teams, high energy, like PSG away, for example, that was a fantastic performance against the press.
Yeah.
You know, but these things don't get spoken about. But going back to Zubimendi, for me, he is someone who's going to improve Arsenal's ball to feet game by tenfold. I maintain that. You know, in terms of, like you've alluded to, the tempo control, when to speed it, when to slow it down. But it's the thing that and we'll probably talk about this in a different pod, but I don't think Arsenal move enough off the ball, and especially these diagonal movements. Well, again, we saw it last season in moments, but I feel like we can do more of it, where if you look at PSG, Fabian Ruiz, Vitinha, and João Neves, they're constantly moving off each other. Zubimendi, if you watch them for Spain, he's always understanding where the space is and what positions to occupy to progress play. I refer to it as good height because I saw that Declan Rice article and he was stressing it a lot, where Mikel was pointing to him, and this was when he was playing nominally as his number 6. It was against Crystal Palace. It was against Everton, where there was a space that was left, and Arteta mentioned how you, therefore, doesn't matter what position you are, you need to fill that space, because if you don't fill that space, we can't progress play. We'll have to go back and we'll have to recycle it. So that onus on being able to understand where the space is, Zubimendi is top for that. And you see that for Spain, and that's where I look at the transferable qualities. So he's going to improve us so much on the ball. Now, when I look at his partnership with Declan Rice, I look at two players in which, if there is a weakness of Declan Rice's game, when we're talking about using him in the optimum way, I would say Declan Rice back to goal against a high man-to-man press. He's not going to escape or evade pressure. He's going to play the wall pass. I've mentioned this to Alex a few times. He'll play the wall pass to Saliba, or he'll play the wall pass to Gabriel. Zubimendi is so intelligent in those scenarios, and I think he mitigates the weaknesses that Declan Rice has in those situations. And then, vice versa, when I look at Zubimendi, one of the things I think he's very underrated in, and we've both spoke about this as well, is his dueling capacity. Aerially, he is fantastic for his size and how he meets duels and when the distances are tight. And that's why when we're talking about pressing high, and we'll go into it in terms of the changes that we think will always be there under Mikel, Zubimendi is fantastic when the distances are very close together and backing up the press. But when the distances lengthen and largen, that's where he will struggle if he doesn't get there. That's very similar to Jorginho, and that's where Declan Rice really helps him. So there's a lot more to it, but I think for me, he's someone who's going to improve our ball-to-feet game massively. He's going to add more technical quality. He's going to give us more range in passing. And I think he's very underrated off the ball, and I think he can form a really strong partnership with Declan Rice.
Yeah, I think I remember when I was first watching Zubimendi, one of my biggest critiques was holding a parachute in big spaces, which, by the way, is still there. I don't want to ignore that. That is going to be a weakness, but I think it lends quite a bit into how we use him. And mate, one of my biggest things on Twitter at the moment is really trying to caveat this Jorginho comparison, because I think it's there. It's there in aspects, but I think Zubimendi has a different level of agility and a different level of physicality to even Jorginho, both on and off the ball. We see it a little bit in their defending styles. They're both high anticipatory players that really use that anticipation as their key. So they get there earlier than the duel needs for it so that they can nick in and get the ball. But even in the tackle, Zubimendi's a lot stronger than Jorginho. It's what allows for that really high aerial duel success rate. Yeah. I mean, both get to challenges early, but this guy is 5'10" and stocky. He's not 5'10" and nothing. You know, he's got a little bit of power there. And then on the ball, I think Jorginho's incredibly intelligent. I think that Zubimendi has a little bit more speed in that first 5 yards and carrying capacity, where Jorginho, for me, is very calm and measured in some of his passes, and they're simple. However, I don't see Jorginho receive off the back foot, turn and burst through the middle of the park as much. Maybe a little bit in his younger days, but I thought he was always more of a pass-first player by nature. Zubimendi, he can pass. Don't get me wrong. His range of pass is incredible. This guy can carry, though, and carry quite a bit. And he reminds me so much of Gundogan, in a lot of different ways. And I think people are going to look at the stats and how his progressive numbers aren't crazy. But then when you start looking at the percentage of his passes that are progressive, that's crazy. And I start saying, well, that matches my eye. Because when I have a look at this guy in terms of some of the line breakers that he can do, mate, I really feel the Jorginho versus Anfield of having Zubi a little bit higher is going to be something that we see more than people think. And this idea of having Martin Zubimendi even be the first pressure and the first trigger in our press over a Declan Rice, I think they're going to swap depending on who that DM and how physical that DM is, because he can do it. And, you know, for me, I just think he changes our life in so many ways, but I'm really excited about the final third impact. And I kind of wanted to get your feeling about, after having watched him a bit, do you share some of that excitement? Because I feel that there's a huge unlocked potential with Martinelli in terms of the early pass. Like, one of my most frustrating things with Arsenal in the final third is I actually think, mate, we do make a lot of good runs. I think one of my most biggest annoyance is that we are a little safe in the way that we enter the final third a little bit. And there are a lot of really brilliant runs. We don't choose the risky pass. We really make sure that our entry into the box is going to guarantee into a touch in the box, as opposed to maybe trying an extra risky pass that is a little bit more vertical. Zubimendi does that. Zubimendi is an incredibly vertical passer. He is an incredibly adventurous passer, and he's not afraid to trivela his way through a really tight gap. He's not afraid to try a long switch, even if he's in the final third, to long switch it out to the right. He's not afraid to do these things, and I just feel that's going to be a huge upgrade in terms of our final third play. As much as like the standout build-up stuff is there in the face. What do you say about kind of some of the Gundogan comparison that maybe I'm bringing a bit? Like, do you see it? Do you feel as though maybe it's a little bit more anchor in how we're going to use him? What's your gut telling you about how that partnership with Rice is going to look in reality?
So for me, actually, you made some points that kind of fit into one of the tweets that I did yesterday, and I'll bring it up in a second. And it was a really good data viz from an account called @Photovision. And basically, this account looked at, and I think it was till game week 35, so 3 more games left. You can draw good comparisons there, and you can really paint the story of the season. And it looked at line breaking passes. So it looked at the total line breaking passes that teams had in the Premier League, all different teams, and it looked at the percentage within specific aspects. And I'll go into that in a second, but going back to your Zubimendi point about the carries, that for me is one of the differences to him and Jorginho, where in the final third, Jorginho does this. It's his textbook move. When the opposition is pinned deep in their own half, own third / box, Jorginho receives it horizontally. He plays the dink ball immediately. So he's pass first. He plays the dink ball over the top to try and get someone in behind. He does it time and time again. Him and Kai Havertz developed a really good partnership there. Whereas Zubimendi, and you saw it for Spain, sometimes what he'll do is he'll receive it, and if the space is opened up where if we pin the team deep, he will carry into that space before releasing the pass. So I see that comparison there. And he has that power in the carry. There was a really good moment actually against Portugal where he receives it under pressure, drops the shoulder, evades Bruno Fernandes, drives into the space and commits to marker, and he draws the foul. So he has more variety in his game there and a lot more unpredictability. But going back to that tweet, right? So, and I want to make this point. So again, it's looking at line breaking passes within specific categories. There's like 8 of them, but I want to focus on 3. So percentage of line breakers through and inside. So basically, this very much is like your central progression, right? It'll be difficult for audio listeners to understand and really visualize it. But just picture Arsenal in a scenario where we're looking to break lines centrally. Arsenal ranked 17th in the Premier League. Mm-hmm. Right? Line breakers over and in behind. So then we're talking about that ball over the top where, like, for example, Liverpool, how many times do they do that? The clip ball over the top, yeah. Arsenal rank 18th, joint with Spurs. Line breakers through and outside. So those passes where we're inside the block and then we funnel it wide immediately to a Saka to try and fix him 1v1. We rank 3rd. Like, you expect that. That's one of our staples. You know, it's the wide play that we really put profound emphasis on. So the through and inside, Zubimendi will help us so much there in terms of receiving inside the block and then finding players between the lines. Now, there's things that we'll need to do more in terms of really elevating that. I actually think, you know, we spoke about this with Miles, where from a central progression point of view in the carry, Miles really elevated Arsenal in terms of receiving in the block, turning and carrying. But passing, we can still do way more. And I think Zubimendi helps a lot there. But that ball over the top, for me, George, we spoke about it. We did the pod post-Anfield. The Martinelli out to in run, we did not do that at all, barely in the season. At all. And it makes it frustrates me so much. So 1, we don't do it enough. And 2, I don't think we are brave enough to play the ball over the top as well. You know, so there's 2 aspects there. It's like both worlds we're not getting right, you know, but we can make the run. Martinelli made that run time and time again. Saka made that run against Liverpool where Ben White plays that clip ball over the top. I feel like people, like, okay, we're going really nerdy here. So just brace yourself, right? You are a fullback, okay? And and the ball is let's say you're a left back, right? And the ball is being funneled towards the right hand side. Your body shape, you're side on, you're ready to close the touchline, okay? That ball goes over the top and the winger makes a straight vertical run down the byline. That's a lot easier to defend. Whereas a diagonal run, you have to shift, turn your hips, backpedal, and then recover relative to the winger who knows that ball is coming, who's already got the head start, and he's there. And then the fullback, with all this happening, all this information that you have to process, is then unbalanced, as you saw with Andy Robertson. The winger's already set, and Saka scores. And Martinelli, again, he was making this run time and time again where Konate was jumping high on Trossard, and then Bradley wasn't able to spot the run of Martinelli. He was in behind, but we didn't find that pass. So we don't do the run enough, and we don't play the ball enough. And that, for me, is something Zubimendi will give, and that's what excites me. It's a range of different types of passes that I think is going to elevate this team. So, yeah, that was very nerdy, but yeah.
Yeah, I love it. We love the nerd. We warned you, it was a Nerd Fest pod, so you got what you guys wanted. Mate, I think even just to kind of transition away from the Zubimendi of it all, because when I'm having a look at some of the panic, this kind of transfer window, a lot of it has to do with how prepared Arsenal are. And I mean, I would argue that Zubimendi is the most important signing to have done early, like as a broad scheme. Like if we're going to buy anybody that's not named Isak, then the upgrade is going to be arguable.
Yeah,
it just is. And if you're not going to change your role, and this is something that we might get into in some questions, but if you're not going to change some of the tactical setup, then sorry, I'd argue that some of the Martinelli critiques we're going to see in even new players. I mean, there might be some that might help it, but as far as this learning the system, how important it must be, Zubimendi is going to be critical. That is the one player that is going to be make or break on their adaptation and build up. And I think for them to be done early is something that's not being said. Again, even amongst the link fatigue, like it's a brilliant signing, but we also need this to work, and he needs the most work. He's the most intelligent player that we're probably going to recruit, but at the same time, he still needs the practice to understand the system, which is very different from Sociedad. So to have that done, and then I wanted to transition into Gabriel and Miles Lewis-Skelly, who, again, huge deals, mate. Huge deals. And, if you got a chance to re-sign the best left-footed left center back in the world, who, by the way, is setting the precedent for a big three. Gabriel's always 6 months before kind of your Bukayo Saka's, your Salibas, and even your Martinelli's, like just in terms of their contract years, right? Like getting that done is incredible. Like what do you think? What do you make of maybe the Miles contract? I'd love to get your opinion on it, because there was one line that I thought was quite pointed about Mikel Arteta being crucial. That has got spun quite a bit. People like to laugh at that because, like, how important is it? But, I do think that low key, mate, like the Miles extension isn't as simple as what people are saying, because the interest that boy had was concrete from Madrid. Like, let's just have that right. He had the best teams in the world looking at him. And yes, he's a Hale End boy. But also there was an interview. I'm going to bring it up. Everybody knows how I feel about Miles and where I see his position. But he talked about, how do you feel about your introduction, your debut into the first team and playing as a defender for the first time? And he said, I have the talent that I back myself to go and play in midfield, but wherever the coach wants me to play, I will do a job for what the coach wants to do. And that's the perfect attitude that you have to have coming into the team as a youngster. But mate, if I'm Miles, okay, and I'm trying to put myself in his shoe, and I'm looking at our midfield, I'm looking at what it lacks, okay? Some of the things that we've critiqued it so much, and I know my superpower, and I'm looking behind, and I'm thinking, okay, I've got Timber, I've got Saliba, I've got Rice, I've got Gabriel, I'm recruiting Zubimendi, I've got Martin Odegaard, who can help in the middle third. Do I really need to add to the transition control? Can I burst forward like is my gut? I know I have to calm down, but I have had a season inside me now. I'm one of the first names on the team sheet. I've established myself as that at Arsenal already. I'm not walking in as the plucky youngster who's just happy to be there and contribute. I'm now a first team member. I've gotten a contract that is now first team member. I mean, an important contract, one of the best in the youth. Mate, you're talking 120 minimum, at least 100.
Yeah.
A week, I'm assuming. I don't have confirmation, but to make those claims, you're talking in that number. So he's not coming in without that expectation in preseason. Like, I think those combos had to have been made. What do you make of the squad building impact of having those Gabriel and the Miles Lewis-Skelly's done? Understanding that Ethan, Saka, and Saliba seem to be quite advanced in their own negotiations. Like, if you combine those 5 extensions on top of 4 to 5 signings of your choice, mate, that's a crazy amount of business. Like, where do you rank on how important that needs to be highlighted as far as the checks in the business go?
Honestly, mate, I think, listen, we are all desperate for new players and signings because, like I always say, it is the preeminent driver, right? Quality. It is. I know it is, but
there we go. We've got a question whether or not we're going to get a preeminent driver.
We got it. but honestly, mate, right at the top level, go and look at football over the years, right? That's what sets teams apart because tactically, you can always improve, you can always iterate, you can always evolve. But if you don't have the personnel, forget about it. Arsenal will not sign a better player than retaining a Gabriel, let's say, for example. They won't, in terms of what Gabriel offers Arsenal. If Arsenal weren't able to tie, let's say, a Gabriel down, if Arsenal weren't able to tie down, let's say, a Saliba down, and there's serious doubts there over their futures, and let's say, in the hypothetical world, one of them left, the amount of work we'd have to do to replace them, like, obviously, you've got a Calafiori. We've seen a lot of potential. We're massive on Calafiori, right? But you are losing the best left-footed centre-back in the world, right? And that sets you back. So do not take it for granted. That's what I'm saying. And it's the same with likes of Saliba, where like people will say Saliba had a poor season. I think that's outrageous. Honestly think it's outrageous. Because for me, we mentioned it, we're very nerdy on this, but for me, he had his best on-the-ball season. And 2, it's what's happened is Saliba's had some like high profile mistakes, isolated mistakes, and they're using that to make a judgment on what he has been doing this season, when in fact those who watched him every game, like I say, I watch every single Arsenal game week in, week out twice, right? Phenomenal. And you lose those types of players. These are the key pillars that have got Arsenal to where they are right now, right? You lose them, suddenly, not only does the quality of the team drop off, but also what does that say about the project as well? What does that say about the belief in Mikel and in what we are doing? So for me, this is just as important as any new signings, and I think that it should be celebrated. And the same with Miles. Miles, what he's done, we've said it many times, is unprecedented. You know, you were the big Miles Lewis-Skelly advocate from early days. But I don't even think, George, you would have even envisaged the impact that he made immediately, like that. Miles Lewis-Skelly has had maybe 1 or 2 bad performances. One of them came against PSG away from home. But honestly, the games that he's featured in a role that normally is not his preferred position, playing against a wide range of different attackers, and he has stamped his authority. And Real Madrid being one of the teams that are really interested, this shouldn't be a shock to anyone because they were able to see this firsthand in the 2 games that they played against Arsenal and what Miles was able to do. And it should be celebrated with what we are doing here.
Yeah, I do want to go a little bit more on that because I was huge onto him, but I've said it multiple times. Even somebody like me, his biggest fan, I call him my son, did not expect for him to walk in and be the best left back in the country when he got introduced.
Yeah.
That was the reality. That it led to him getting an international debut. Mate, we're talking in England. I don't know, but you're in England. Is the talk not that he's potentially the starting left back in the World Cup coming up?
Honestly, mate, it literally in the office, my workplace, they go to me because I was telling them, I was saying like, watch out for Miles, watch out for him, because he's top, right? What you're seeing, and because what happened, George, is like, listen, people are not going to watch Arsenal week in, week out. They don't, and that's okay, right? So what they see is what was surfacing in the media in terms of certain things that were happening with Miles, like the red cards. And they'll look at that without really watching the highlights or looking at it at all.
The narrative that they adopt.
Yeah, it's the narrative, right? And do you know what? I can't like fault them because they don't care in that sense, right? But they look at that and think, you know, oh, is he all that? It's like, no, I said, trust me. When you see him play for England, when he will get his breakthrough chance, you'll see it. And immediately in the first couple of games, they're like, wow, he's insane.
From debut goal.
He's insane. Yeah, debut goal. Look. And this for me, George, it's like for me, it's just not normal what he's done, right? You know, debut season, like I said, in a position that is not his preferred one. Yes, in possession, in a lot of games, he tucks into midfield because of what the opposition is doing. But there are a lot of differences at left back relative to midfield. I really want to stress that. There's so many differences. So it is not normal what Miles has done in his debut season at 18 years old, where, like you said, he has been the best left back in the country. And England are actually blessed. They've got 2 fantastic left backs right now who've been playing in Lewis Hall and Miles. Yeah. You know, so blessed. They're blessed.
And I also just don't want to undersell his journey because, mate, like you may not know this, but like in the academy, right, there were questions about Miles's defensive instincts. And it wasn't necessarily 1v1, but he was played at number 6 because sometimes he didn't have the best understanding about when to receive in the first phase. And there was moments in which, even, by the way, he first played inverted left back, by the way, for the youth teams in England, in which he was played, switched to the right one time, but he was also played as an inverted left back like once or twice. But as far as the left back sample, he played less than 5 appearances before his introduction to the Arsenal first team. So I want people to understand the novelty to that position for him. It wasn't just walk in the park, I'm doing what I know, I'm platforming what I know. No, he was asked to do a very different role, one that he wasn't always comfortable in. And again, I maintain, he was asked to play as a 6 in many moments in the academy because we all knew what he was like going forward. There was never any question about that. But there were times in which some of his defensive instincts, as far as tracking runners in your blind side, as far as there was a little bit of rushing to get the ball forward with Miles when he was first coming through. And Yeah, like there was work to be done, but then when you look at the sample that he's done in the first team, that's the complete opposite to what he's shown. He has shown a lockdown 1v1 defending ability. Mate, I'll say it, equal to the level of Timber. Like when you look at some of the repertoire that he's been able to lock down. Yes, there's been some mistakes, but look at the repertoire. We talk about the Timber prison that he's been able to accumulate. What about the Miles prison that's been able to accumulate? It has been incredible.
Morgan Rogers, Rodrigo,
mate.
Desiree Douay in the first game.
The list is long. The list is long.
Yeah.
And this is just all without showing his major superpower for me, and he's shown it in glimpses. This has all been whilst not being able to show his bread and butter, his normalcy. So for me, yeah, mate, like I look at these contract extensions in general with Miles. I think it's brilliant that we've been able to do it. I think it sets the tone in the team that these guys really do see that their future is here from both ends of the spectrum. Gabriel, this was his last big contract. Mate, he could have gone anywhere in the world to go and win a trophy for the last time. Miles could have gone anywhere to start his career. He's established himself on the world stage. Let's have it right. It's not a given that he was going to stay with Arsenal. You have Madrid interest, okay, who have just recruited Trent Alexander-Arnold, and it's Madrid. I don't care.
It's Madrid, mate.
It is Madrid.
Yeah.
So this idea that it's a given that he's going to re-sign with Arsenal amongst that interest, amongst two players that give you kind of the epitome at different ends of the career. One where they're like, okay, in my prime, can I win something with Arsenal? And an 18, 19-year-old where it's like, okay, these next couple of years, I'm establishing myself as a superstar. Who can garner that? Both mentalities see Arsenal as the place to do it. And if they follow it up with Ethan, they follow it up with Saka and Saliba, that's it, more than enough sample of prime age players saying Arsenal will win a trophy. And that's significant to me.
And do you know what it is as well, George? It gives even more confidence to the fans who have uncertainty of potential refresh that is required, right? Because football goes in cycles, just in anything in life. I think the Gabriel one's very important here, right? Because Gabriel is the first major signing in the Mikel Arteta tenure. You know, so he saw the lows. He saw what was happening during, that dreaded run before Boxing Day 2020. And then he had the games against Manchester City where we were struggling. And now he's had the games against Man City where we're thriving. And he said it in an interview where before it was worry going into those games. Now it's thriving and relishing the opportunity. And for someone like that, like you alluded to sign on, because again, he's gone through a lot of these turbulent spells, shows utmost faith in what Arsenal are looking to do. And it's the same, if you sign on all these other players, it gives the fans even more belief that these guys are committed and they're ready to go again. Like, we've not won anything, right? But the hardest thing to do in the Premier League, and Sir Alex Ferguson has said it, many coaches have said it who've won the Premier League, where you win it once, it's hard, but you win it again, it's way trickier because it's the motivation levels. This Arsenal team haven't won a Premier League yet. This Arsenal team haven't won a Champions League yet. Yeah, if you can secure these guys down with Arsenal, not in terms of tangible measures of success, and what I mean by that is trophies, haven't done anything, for them to secure their futures here in that way is real encouragement. And going back to the Miles point, just really quickly. Now, I think it seems quite conspicuous that his eventual transition to midfield will happen. When it happens, we'll have to wait and see. But I really want Mikel to put Miles in more situations where he's receiving higher inside the block between the midfield and defensive line. Like I say, I'll go back to that tweet, right, in terms of the numbers. Statistically, Arsenal, through and inside, they rank really poorly. Why? One of the reasons why is because we do not put players between the defensive and midfield line who are comfortable receiving on the half turn and then carrying and facing play and opening the game up. Declan Rice, we love him. Certain games, it just doesn't make sense in him being in that space. It makes sense for someone like Miles to be in that space because he can do it and he's natural in that way. So, that's what I want to see next.
And I think that the segments that we've just talked about on the pod, they build towards that evolution. The importance of Zubimendi, having that build-up pressure to relieve that. Like Miles, it's so weird, mate. We have relied on Miles not just in a 1v1 capacity. We have relied on him to really take us up the pitch too. In moments. He's been at times some of our bravest passing. and our bravest passer from deep. But having like a Zubimendi, you'd hope, does that. Having a Gabriel re-signed, transition control down that side, like you're really beefing that side to have the freedom that it can in midfield, aren't you? With like some of those moves.
100%.
And I mean, I want to really lightly touch on it, like the rumored interest of Haydo, which I don't want to get into because it might derail us a bit. We'll have to talk about the impact of that. But even moves like that are looking to shore up and finalize this transition control. I mean, even if Thomas Partey leaves, we're looking to have a Gume come in. Like there are contingencies to make the back five as secure as possible. And the one thing that I wish for in a new Arsenal in, next season, let's improve the freedom the front five have. The structure to chaos dial needs to shift a bit. And yes, we've prioritized things, but it leads us into our next point, because in order to do that,
I love that.
The dial, depending on the dial, what are things that are off the dial? There are certain things that
I knew you were going to get there. I knew. I was thinking, is he got something planned here? I feel he does. I was thinking, yes, go on, Georgie boy.
But yeah, you know what? It was a brilliant question. Like we've got, I definitely want to credit the man that asked me, and I'm sure he asked you as well, at Tricky Reds, on X. So definitely have a look at that. He basically asked us, I don't know the exact one because my phone's got down, but
I can go into it. Yeah, I can go into it. Basically, I've not got his exact tweet, but I know what it is. So it's at Tricky Reds 14. So really, really good question, because what he's basically referring to is like, again, you've done scouters with Alex. You've looked at evolution, transformations. We spoke about it on pods as well, in terms of what Arsenal are going to do and going to change. But what about the other side of the coin? And what are things that Mikel is not going to change, irrespective of signings? And I thought that's a fantastic question. And that's where I really wanted to think about it more. And I don't know how you want to go into this, but for me, like, I always think you can be confident in a player evolution to a specific role, for example, but I don't think you can be certain, because Mikel has shown time and time again his ability to evolve tactically. And he has shown this, I think at times mid-season, though it's not as frequent, but predominantly like during the start of a new season, you see it. But there are certain things that I think will remain, this is the word of the day, sacrosanct. Won't change. Oh, give me the word of the day. So, I don't know. I can start if you want, George, or if you wanted to go into it. Things that you think Mikel won't change, like, and we can list them off.
Yeah, I can give you like some. I think there are a couple. The one thing I don't agree with changing, and it's probably my biggest opposition to Rafael Leao, just in function, because it is going to be that the press is our identity. You don't build it to the way that it has and to the degree that it has topped anything in world football. You don't have Mikel previously looking to actually sign Pep Linders before going off to Man City. You don't do those if that's not a part of your fabric at your core. So the pressing fundamentals, and I want to get a little bit more specific, because we say the press. That's very vague. I think that the way that we structure our press, in which the auxiliary players look to guide a black hole almost for the center to tackle, is going to be something that we're going to see. We have our striker and our attacking midfielder, Martin Odegaard, that tend to guide play out to the wings, and our fullbacks are really tight and aggressive, and our wingers use the touchline in order to have them be the tackle, in a sense. Have the touchline and our fullbacks be the ones really crunching into that tackle. Now, that's a very arduous job, like the work that our wingers do in order to funnel, not necessarily tackle, but create the run to force the second trigger to step up. And I mean, maybe you can speak about this, like you love the pressing triggers, but to me, the wide like work that gets done by the opposition winger, even on an underloaded side, especially when we're forcing play maybe to the right, but the work that they do to tuck in and protect the center in case a ball gets lost, that is something that's huge. Those are things that I don't think will change. And by the way, I don't think they should change. I don't care that you're a superstar. Like, that to me means that our central control is at a peak because of the work that happens there. So for me, that's something that we won't change categorically, in my opinion. I think another thing that I've had a look at, and I really don't think that we're going to change, is I don't think that we're going to change how flexible we've been in build-up. In fact, it got not worse, but better throughout the season. Like, the degree to which we change positions in build-up was from before we were really rigid. And then now I saw a level of flexibility that I just think, wow, we've gone the next level. People clown the defensive recruitment, but it follows, right? Like, the most recruited area now has the most freedom in the team. So I don't think that will change. So the most free part of our team will be at the back, as much as it will frustrate people. I don't agree that we won't be free up front. I just want to be clear. But the most freedom, the most interchange that you're going to see is going to be at the back, because it's got the most players that have been in the system the longest, and they understand it to a deeper level. So I don't think that will change. And then lastly, what I don't think will change, it's probably a little bit of a lame one, but I wanted to have a little bit of a Yurda moment. I don't believe that Bukayo Saka's importance to this team will diminish in any capacity. For some reason, I feel like I'm fighting to have Bukayo Saka named MVP of Arsenal season consistently. And I have a look at some of the stuff he does, and just, mate, he was reaching a different level last season before he got injured. Like, I think people kind of saw it, but there was a different. It wasn't like I saw flashes. I saw a superstar. I saw Salah. Like, I saw the inevitability. He could play like crap and impact the game. He always had that consistency to him, but there was an aggression and a nastiness to me that Saka was generating, and I think we've got a killer. I am confident in saying that I believe, in my opinion, Bukayo Saka is not just one of the best players in the world. I think he is reaching the point, in terms of me, of playing into his legendary status. There was a couple years in which his talent was developing. He was a brilliant talent, a world-class talent. That transition from talent to superstar, I think, has happened. We've closed the book. For me, he's a superstar, and I just think that we're going to continue to see it. And I hope the caveats that we put, oh, he needs a pod of Ben White or Martin Odegaard. Oh, he needs this or he needs that. Oh, Martin Odegaard may need this player. No. Bukayo is the project for me. And I just don't think that will change next year, next 2 to 3 years. And if we fail to not recognize that, it could be our own failure, is probably where I stand on my top 3. But yeah, I've waffled.
No, that's really good, mate. That's really good.
What do you make in terms of what will not change?
So usually I just talk freely, right? But I wanted to make sure I got all of these, because I did right. I didn't want to forget any of them.
He's prepared. This he watches, guys.
No, I genuinely just talk free flow, and I don't bother having anything to me. But I wanted to make sure I got all these. But just going back to that Saka point, right? He was absolutely on course to breaking the assist record. Now, I'm not saying he'd do it, because it feels like every time it comes towards the stretch, they can't do it. They can't break that record. But he was genuinely in freak form, and he started off against Wolves. You remember the opening day where he absolutely does ate Nuri, and he smashes it, and then the celebration as well. It's like, yeah, that's just me. You know, it was the arrogance in his celebration that I thought, wow, this is different. And then the Liverpool goal, you know, the one, the Ben White clip ball over the top. I mean, that's a Liverpool goal in itself, and that's a Salah goal in itself, you know? And then when you went and spoke about the fact that, you know, there were games in which he was not effective, but then still had that Midas touch, that ability to produce something. Newcastle at St. James's Park also didn't deserve anything from that game, right? But Saka put it on a sixpence for Declan Rice to convert in stoppage time, and he misses it. This is what we're talking about, that inevitable quality no matter what. And actually, what he was doing it in is unfavourable circumstances. And it goes back to your point in terms of not needing certain players around him to flourish. You give him inadequate surroundings, he will still be able to do something. Half fit Ben White. Barely any games with Jurriën Timber before injury. Kai Havertz playing in Martin Odegaard's position in his absence. Thomas Partey at right back, and he was doing all of this. So yeah, I think that's going to be that's going to remain, in terms of his impact. But yeah, I think the press, you spoke about that brilliantly. That's not going to change. There's not going to be any compromises there. I think the other thing for me that kind of falls into that, and I don't agree with it in every game, but effectively in deeper situations off the ball, when the opposition pushes their fullbacks higher, pushes their central midfielders higher to form a partnership with their wingers, Mikel will always ask his wingers to track and defend deeper. That will be a non-negotiable for him. It's not the same as Arne Slot. What Arne Slot does with Salah, everyone knows now. It's quite clear, is that he keeps Salah high. He's basically saying, we will suffer the numerical disadvantage that the opposition does on our right-hand side from a defensive point of view, but we believe keeping you higher there, where we can hit you early, will pay dividends. And it did pay dividends for them, to be fair. They won the league, and he had his most productive season. So I don't think that will change in the Mikel. Now we're getting really nerdy, right? Getting proper nerdy. So now we've spoke about our ability against high pressing teams in terms of playing through pressure. Arsenal going long will remain a key staple in Mikel Arteta's tenure. It won't go away. Having someone like David Raya, look at the players that we have in terms of the height. Mikel Merino, Declan Rice, Kai Havertz. We will always go long in some way, shape or form. In terms of the volume, that can vary, but that will be a key aspect to our play. And then going even further into that, and I find this very interesting. So in scenarios where Arsenal are struggling to control the environment, so let's say in a scenario where Arsenal are 2 goals in front and the opposition, we're away from home, they peg us back 2-1. And football, momentum in sport in general is crazy. It can change the how a game is just like that in a flick of the switch. And when away from home, the opposition fans are generating that noise because they've got a goal back and we're struggling to control that environment, we will look to go long towards the corner flag, towards the throw-in areas to win first balls, second balls, flick-ons, throw-ins, set pieces, indirect free kicks, corners, to really stem the momentum that the opposition is generating there. Now, that is very different to like a Pep Guardiola, where, okay, if the opposition gets a goal back and they've reduced the deficit from 2 to 1, they will still look to keep their foot on the ball and they'll try and slow it down and be in a scenario where we want to keep the ball still. We don't care what is happening in that given moment. We want to be in possession of it. So I think that's a quite clear difference there in that scenario where, and I've seen it, right, George? I can give you examples and you can watch it back. When we played West Ham at the Olympic Stadium, fantastic game. We were 4-0 up. West Ham scored 2 goals in quick succession. And there was a little bit of uneasiness. And I saw it. They went to Mikel Arteta. The cameras went to him. And he was going to David Raya. He was going to Gabriel. Go long. We can manage this scenario this way. It's not the case that we're going to do that consistently. But just in that moment, we'll go long to try and control it and use our dueling capacity to win throw-ins, to win corners.
We have that flexibility that we're not willing to,
yeah.
Remain in the principles so much that the Pep does. Yeah.
So I think that is going to be something crucial. And the final thing, there's more, but I want to finish on this one. And again, it goes back to defensively. In a scenario where it's late in the game, we've got a 1-goal lead, Arsenal will still be comfortable suffering without the ball in added time because we are confident in doing so. Now, from a fan perspective, right, I've seen Arsenal see out games time and time again. You feel relaxed. Although, ironically, last season our record from winning positions wasn't great. But what it is like we are comfortable playing that way because of, like I said, the players that we have in the back. Now it's nervy, but that's something that we will look to keep going with. I think so. Yeah, and just a final one. I think you're still going to see Arsenal in terms of how they create chances going wide. Half space cross situations, cutbacks. We're still going to do those things, So, I think these are just aspects that it doesn't matter what players we bring in, Mikel won't change.
No, I do agree. I agree, and I kind of strayed away from making this a Mikel conversation, which we can definitely have maybe in another pod, just because we're now almost at the hour 5-minute things. But I think that this is a good question that we can definitely get Alex in on, because I think that there might be some cultural and club things that we won't change. This was all very nerdy and on the pitch about things that won't change, but I think there are some cultural things that we also won't change. And as a club and the way that we do things, again, not maybe stuff that I totally agree with, but we always talk about change. And I think it's a good thing for us to pay some attention about some of the things that maybe we don't feel will change. Because we are looking into a lot of your questions, and a lot of them have to do with these lack of changes potentially with Rodrigo.
You're on fire today.
I'm just killing these transitions.
I can see how happy you are as well there.
Mate, I've been thinking, and I'm like, you know what? I got to get better at this. So, but maybe, mate, like, as you can go through some of your own questions, it is question time. It is time for questions. We will start with Rohan, but first I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, by the way, for signing up for the new director's box. We've been going through a ton of changes, and I won't stress Rohan with all of the extra exclusives that we can offer on the spot with it, but it's really exciting time. So thank you so much. If you guys do like and you want to support the pod, we love you either way. We don't love our children differently. We love the oldest and the youngest. So whether you choose directors or normal, or even you want to chance us on a free trial, we love you for doing that. You can also just click down on the link down below on Patreon. And of course, you've got a ton of different exclusives as far as Scouteds go, rewatches go, a ton of different podcasts as well. We've got some like shock things with, Miles's mom every now and then. We do a little bit of financial experts. There's content for you. If you don't like that stuff and you want to have a laugh, Rohan does a brilliant job co-hosting TCP Live, which is one of my favorite initiatives that we do offer. It gives us a little bit more of like a different fun side to the podcast.
Takes the edge off things.
Mate, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I love it. I just think that there is a little bit of content for every type of viewer. If you're a little weird, you're a little nerdy, you're a little bit of both. We try to appease. And so thank you so much for all your love and support. We really do appreciate it. Anyways, enough of that. We will move on to you, Mr. Rohan Jivan. Can you give us our first question?
I will indeed, on the lovely Discord, for this name. Oh, God, I'm going to struggle with this one. From Sturm T Gripupu. Oh, God. I'm so sorry if I butchered that. So he's basically saying, what's a bigger issue? Our inability to sell players or our inability to make good buys? I could start with this. So I really push back on the good buys thing, personally. Like, I really do. I feel like, I don't know about you, George, but whenever I do look on the timeline, and again, it's as a consequence of what's happened last season, in my opinion, I think that's where the frustrations have lied. And that's where we start to look really in depth on what we have spent under Mikel. And it's the classic 600 million down the drain, all this wastage. If you look at our signings in the Mikel Arteta era, 90% of them have been top. I'll maintain that 90% of them. When we're looking at signings such as Nuno Tavares and Sambi Lokonga as bad buys, let's say that is the narrative, right? Firstly, they're really low purchase signings. And secondly, in the situation that Arsenal are in that moment where they were looking to buy players, they were not in the position that they're in right now, or the position that they were in last season, or the position that they were in the season before. They were in the pits of hell, to buy players and to really attract stars. So that's where I really push back on when we look at certain signings not going well, when firstly, they're really low purchase signings, and secondly, you have to consider where Arsenal were in that moment. But then you go through the signings that we've made under Mikel. Aaron Ramsdale was an objectively good signing, in my opinion, in terms of what he offered in that moment to what he offered to the last day at Arsenal. He was a key pillar in terms of Arsenal being able to challenge, right? You look at Ben White, you look at Tomiyasu. Tomiyasu will be looked on as a poor signing, but I can't look at Tomiyasu as a poor signing of being a £16 million purchase. And the times that he did play, and he played a fair bit when he was available, gave us consistency. I can't look at him as a poor buy. Declan Rice, David Raya, Martin Odegaard. There's so many players. Gabriel. I think Thomas Partey's been a solid signing for Arsenal as well in that given moment, even though he has had a lot of availability issues. And then you go towards the now, the likes of Jury and Timber. There are question marks over the likes of we're massive on Calafiori, but as of today, in terms of the availability, he hasn't given that. So there is question marks there. I think there are probably question marks over Mikel Merino. There's certainly question marks on Kai Havertz from a wage point of view, but I'd argue from a performance point of view, he's given Arsenal a lot of quality moments and consistency, particularly towards the back end of 2024 from January onwards. So I really push back on that. Yes, there's been some poor signings in terms of there should be a discussion around them. But when you look at the level of Arsenal spending in line with their competitors, in line with other teams, mate, George, what really annoys me, right? The PSG thing, yeah. PSG, fantastic. Fair play, they've won the league. It's nice. But let's not act like this was some fairy tale story. Look at the amount of money that they spent to assemble that squad. So I think we need to be a lot more objective of this. And in terms of selling, I actually thought Arsenal had a solid selling window last summer, in terms of what we got for Eddie, in terms of what we got for Emil Smith-Rowe. I criticised Mikel in terms of the usage of certain of those players in the season. But in terms of what we got for them, we got good money for them. So that was a good start. And I think the selling, the biggest driver with the selling is how good you are, and also have you tied players down to long-term contracts. In the past, Arsenal weren't in a position to sell well because they weren't at the top, but also the players that we had, we didn't tie them down to long-term deals, and players were running down their contracts, and that's where they had real little value. So I do think that something is turning in terms of the selling. I don't know I think this summer as well we could see some good deals as well. But yeah, and that's a lot there. But I don't know where you kind of sit with.
I think frustratingly, the buy side has just arguably been fairly good value. There's definitely some things like I'm kind of with you. Like the Havertz is a very interesting one where I felt like you can't argue that the value of that he hasn't proven 65 million worth, in terms of output. Like he has now.
But it's the wage, isn't it? Yeah.
The wages, like it is. And him being like basically the top earner is something that I'm like, I don't know if I support that.
That's not right.
I do hear the arguments that was that the best use of 65 million pounds at the time, with the context that we didn't even buy a striker the next year, like on top of it too. Like you could make arguments there. I think there was some fund allocation things, but as a whole, I don't really look at many of our buys and think, wow, what an overpay. Wow, that was not value. And like even the ones that really didn't work out, your Lukungas and your Tavares, I mean, we've got the money back. Like those are bets that you make and you get your money back. And I mean, if you're talking about craziness, I mean, even in terms of, by the way, Neto and Sterling, who I think were like really bad stuff, they set you back a couple £1 million. Like we're not talking.
This is what I mean, George. It's like low purchase, isn't it? It's low purchase signings that have been the real like problems. I think there's an argument in terms of how Arsenal have evolved in the market in terms of where they were competing and some of the deals that we did, but these aren't duds. These aren't poor players. And that's where I really push back on it. So
you could argue the decisions about how we buy, for sure. But in terms of the actual buys, I do push back like you. Like, for example, do I agree that we didn't recruit a forward in 2024? No, that's ridiculous. That's a really big stade. We got him. You had your preeminent driver. I had to slip that in. But it's just the nuanced portion of this. Is it a buy or a sell problem? It is both, but it is not in the way I think fans believe. We don't do bad when we do buy. Our decisions about when to buy, how to buy, do have valid questions to them. And I think on the sell aspect, look, we haven't been good historically. I can't hide behind that. I mean, everyone looks at Liverpool and the prices that they get. And, I don't look at our players as infinitely less than some of these guys that have gone out and been able to garner those fees. We definitely have been poor at it. But I think the biggest issue with my selling thing is I look at the youth and how we've completely mismanaged that avenue through effective loans, getting enough monetization there. We all know the problem. I hope we can have a serious discussion on it, like as a fan base, because I've been driving this, I feel like so many years consistently, and I just don't think it's getting through. And I hope that somebody like that is a journalist can actually ask Mikel, because I think it's one of the only things that we have yet to really address. Now, you could argue, by the way, Berta signing Tognosi is a step in that direction. I mean, as far as head scouting goes, like that's a guy that can identify talent pretty much like no other on the planet. Like he is a move to do that, but selling's a little bit of a different story. Making yourself a destination for youth as far as effective loans. It's why, despite Arsenal being behind on buying youth and being there in the last 1 to 2 years, you haven't chosen Arsenal is because, in my opinion, the loan development path isn't extensive. Like it's just a lot more secure with City and Chelsea. It's just a fact. So when you're debating with these youth, it's not that we have the money. We're in the market now, and we're in the market for these big talents. But as far as development goes too, and what sucks, mate, is that we have done such a huge job in terms of repairing the first team integration part. At Arsenal, they see staples of people coming in. I mean, you look at Ethan, you look at Miles and what they've been able to do. Capitalizing on that factual evidence of an academy product being brought is huge. Don't doubt that. Then you've got the money. But the one thing that, they rightly would have a question about is our developmental loans, is our ability to do that. So from a selling perspective, it's probably my biggest thing.
I think between the point that you made about Tognosi, that's going to be more externally though, isn't it, in terms of recruiting talent? But in terms of internally, how you manage the assets that you have and the value you extract from there, that's a different story, isn't it? And that's where the question marks continue to lie. I actually do think though, you'll know more about this, but I feel like Arsenal the past 2 windows, or maybe it's 3 windows, they've started to look for the best talent out there at other clubs. Like I think we've looked at Wolves, we've looked at, I think, Blackburn as well, and we've recruited some of the top 15, 16, 17-year-olds around the country. So we're doing that right, but it's a case of, when to recognise he's not going to make it, or he's in a situation where he's not going to learn any more playing in the academy. He needs men's first team football where he can go elsewhere, learn from their mistakes, and build that experience. And that's where there's still question marks there. So that's good. So that's definitely something I'd agree with in terms of the selling.
Yeah, and I'll probably end on this type of question as well, because I've got it now like multiple times, and I don't know if the Discord has got it, but there's just been so many questions about basically if we sign Rodrigo and he doesn't change the role of the system, what's the impact on that? I've got it from, I'll just mention that, Theo Wick, W1K, so I think it's Wick. Sorry if I've butchered that, but I've received this question like so many times, and it's almost, I feel, cornering you into a question about Mikel stay or go, but using this as an excuse for it, in a sense. And I think that they're a little bit different conversations. Like the whole impact of Mikel, for me at least, has a completely different question related to a player and player usage. It has a little bit more to do with the overall club and whether I see that stagnating or not. And those are the questions that I do. As far as, like, I don't know, I'll throw it back to you. I mean, I've kind of talked about this at length. I really get frustrated with the comment about will he change or will he won't change. One of my biggest things that I'll just end with, by the way, is if you don't believe that he'll change, nothing I say will change that.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Whether he changes or not, I don't think is the best question. If I was somebody that felt like Mikel is very stringent in his views, would I be having a window that included Jarell Hato, Rodrigo, Zubimendi, when in theory, if you're telling me he doesn't change, why recruit that? Like, there are other players made. By the way, it's not just Nico Williams. Why isn't he after Jamie Bino-Giddens in a huge way if he's convinced that the role won't change? If you're convinced it must be a touchline winger and that the system won't change, why aren't our biggest links against those most eminent touchline wingers? Why did he do Martin Zubimendi if he definitely wasn't going to change Martin Odegaard's role? Why did we recruit Zubimendi so heavily if we weren't going to change some of the roles back there? And then lastly, with Jarell Hato, why is that a really significant link to balance a Rodrigo, which it does? Like the most linked defender pairs with the most linked winger, who is complete opposite to the role that everyone is convinced he won't change in. Like, if it's, by the way, you got to be pretty stupid if you're not going to change to go down that route, is all I'm saying. Like, if those are your moves, whether he does or he doesn't, the outcome will let us know. But I just don't think that a hungry man goes in to buy water when there's a level of food out there. That just doesn't make sense to me. Like, if I'm hungry, I'm getting the pizza at the gas station. I'm not buying a bunch of Smart Water or a bunch of Gatorade. That tells me there's a little bit of a different intent. You're actually kind of thirsty. Like, that is kind of how I view it right now. But I don't know. You may have gotten some similar questions on Discord, but I've gotten that question so many times, so I thought I'd throw it back to you.
No, I mean, that's why I was just scrolling through the Discord and having a look, and there's a lot of questions regarding Rodrigo in general, so it does kind of cover it. So, listen, you know, I've got my critiques on Mikel. I've mentioned it many times in terms of how he uses certain players, that like Declan Rice, you know, lack of variation in terms of his usage. It's not perfect. Using Ethan the way he does on the right wing, where he's not Saka, but you're asking him to do Saka things. I don't get that. Asking Kieran Tierney to come inside predominantly post-Zinchenko era. You know, these are things I question. But what I don't question is Mikel's ability to change, because I've bored people so many times with it. I've gone through the list. I know it off the top of my head because I've watched every single game of Arsenal back twice. He does change. It's a case of if that change is the right one to do. That's a different conversation.
Or quick enough.
You know,
or quick enough even from like a plan A being gone. Yeah, for sure, and valid.
Like you know, like in terms of speed, like should he have played Rob Holding, you know, post Tomiyasu, Saliba injuries in 22-23? Should he have bitten the bullet and gone with Eddie earlier instead of COVID hitting Lacazette before you made that change? You know, these are things in which Mikel, he recognises the problem, but he doesn't do it with speed always, you know. So he will change. And actually for me, like, I do think though, George, let's look at it a different way. If Rodrigo came into Arsenal and he didn't bang, that would be a pretty bad indictment on Mikel, you know. And he didn't use him in the way. It would be a very bad indictment because you've seen what Rodrigo has done. He's a star, you know. But I've maintained it. I've watched a lot of Rodrigo back. What excites me, and it's what you said as well. What excites me is Rodrigo signals a mindset, and I've always felt this mindset with Mikel in terms of Arsenal will go for the best talent available. They will look for that. That is the right way to do it. If you go into the market and say, I need to sign a touchline winger because that is what the system demands right now. I'm sorry, but if you go with that mindset, you are then removing yourself from a wide range of talent. It's predictable, but also, George, you're removing yourself from a wide range of talent that is available there that is different to what you ask for within a specific position in your system. You're removing yourself from that conversation. How does that make any sense? Like, Jurgen Klopp. Okay, George. I don't know about you, but when people tell me about Jurgen Klopp and his way of playing, I don't go, oh, Jurgen Klopp played 4-3-3. That was his identity. No, I go back and I look at high energy, high press, getting the ball in box situations, quick transitions. Great. Those are the ideas, the intentions, and the mindset that his team had, irrespective of the system. You can do that with an inverted fullback. You can do that with an overlapping fullback. You can do that with a touchline winger. You could do that with inside forwards. It doesn't matter. That's the mindset. And what I'm trying to say is basically, you need to look at what the talent is there available in the market, and you need to put your name in that hat if it's available, and make the environment around him flourish. And Arsenal's left-hand side needs a shake-up. It does. Since 22-23, we have not got significant consistency out of that area of the pitch. And teams have recognised it. They go a lot more aggressive to our right-hand side. And they say the left-hand side will go a little bit less aggressive because we don't see you offering that same level of potency. And someone like Rodrigo signals change. And I think it will bring change if that signing does come through. So the way I look at it is, you know, don't remove yourself from the conversation of these top talents. Change the system. You can do it. You can change the system. You can change certain roles and still have the same ideas. You can still press from the front. You can still play a certain way. You can still create chances in a certain way. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, a different type of fullback or a different type of winger. You can still do the same thing. And like I said, I do think it would be a bad indictment if Rodrigo came in and he didn't bang.
Huge. So. And I can't... After the career that Rodrigo has had to date, why would you move Madrid if you're going to do the same, where you're not going to be platformed and you're not going to have extensive conversations about that? Like, he's at Madrid. if I've got a decision to not be platformed, if I go to Arsenal if I go elsewhere, I'm not going to be platform, right, mate? Why the hell am I leaving Madrid? A place that I love, that I'm getting trophies and I'm adulated in already.
And
Why
loved
am I
by the
leaving?
fans as well. And loved by the fans. And that Madrid, mate, you go to Madrid, it doesn't matter who you are. It does not matter. If you do not perform, those fans are onto you. They're onto you like a rash. They love him at Madrid.
They love because he performs. He's got one of the best freaking Champions League records already as young as he is, because he's a quality player. And yeah, that's just where it is for me. Now, if he doesn't, because I've got this question like so many times, and it's like, what if he doesn't? Yeah, I hear that. But what if he doesn't? Then yeah, like it's going to be one of those things that I'm going to start to ask questions about his viability in the squad. It's not going to be the defining factor. You do this or you don't do that. Yeah. To me, that's a collective decision off the back of results for me, in which I feel that the team is stagnated. And if I don't feel that Mikel's voice is longer like the loudest person in the room, the reason that this has worked to get it as far as it has is because not just that he's been the loudest, but it's been the most logical, even in panic. And it's made sense. As soon as things don't make sense to me many times, not just in one player and one player usage, that's when I start, like, that's when I fell with Emery, mate. Like, it wasn't, I am somebody that gives people the benefit of the doubt.
100%.
And
yeah,
I am somebody that feels like you may believe a certain way. I don't agree with it, but I'm willing to hear you out because I know that football can win in a million different ways. I don't ever have this preconceived notion, and it's why people love the whole transfer target list thing. I hate it to a level because I've got my list and I can give you 3 or 4 players. I would prefer the discussion is, hey, I love this profile. What do you think are the best choices for this profile?
Yeah.
As nerdy as that is, that's what I would prefer the discussion be around. Because to me, if another profile crops up like Rodrigo that is completely a different style of play, I'm not going to ignore that and that ability and to see what that could come in. And I do think that one of the biggest misconceptions on Twitter, by the way, is that players make your formations in a sense. And the biggest misconceptions is that formations are what coaches look at as the bedrock to their structure. It isn't. It is intentions, chemistry, and interaction. Yes. Because I can have the Thierry Henry, but that left-hand side isn't what it is without Ashley Cole and Perez. And, Youngberg being able to drop in there. It's a very different potency, right? Like, Salah isn't Salah without Wijnaldum covering his space and Trent being able to send him on those passes. Like, players, this is a team game. So when I have a look at people that are like, I don't see past a certain player because it doesn't look like how I've looked at it, I just get so annoyed and I say, look beyond. You've got to get out of your own head and stop describing what you see and see whether or not you believe these skills, if put in the right way, are a needle mover. That should be the question. Not if, what have I seen this before in the team and therefore because I've seen it, it's viable or it's logical. No, like let's get beyond that. And by the way, if Mikel is that stringent, he's not a good coach. I'll just flat out and say it.
Exactly.
Because I know that's not how he thinks. But that's what I think we need to press beyond as fans, because you're not a good coach if you have those preconceived ideas. You need resoluteness. Everything that we've talked about with the non-negotiables, by the way, they've been traits. They haven't been, I will operate in a 3-2-5. I will.
Yeah, and I will have to have this type of player. Yeah, it's like, for example, I can guarantee you, right? Pep Guardiola's ideal striker is not Erling Haaland. I'll guarantee you that.
Guarantee it.
Because the best Pep Guardiola that we have seen is the 2010 Barcelona team. That era, Pedro, Villa, Messi, Iniesta, Busquets, Xavi, backline Abidal, Alves, Piqué, Puyol. That's what he. That's like Mikel Arteta loves Kai Havertz, but Kai Havertz is not his ideal type of player.
No.
It's not. But it's about being adaptable to what... I'm not saying... The Kai Havertz one's not the best example. What I'm saying is a manager needs to be open-minded to the market and what is out there. And then you tailor what you need to do to get the best out of them, but you can still maintain the ideas, the intentions, the methodology. You can still do it. And that's what frustrates me when we just say Arsenal need to sign a touchline winger. They don't. They don't need to sign one. They might need to in the current iteration of Arsenal, but why should the current iteration of Arsenal stay the same?
I agree. And I think the irony is people do want to put these black and white scenarios, but then if he fails, they're like, he's not flexible.
Exactly.
What do you want? Like, I mean, if you want him to be flexible, surely, because that means he's a different level of coach for you. So yeah, those are kind of my things. We got to wrap it up. It's been an hour and a half of your absolute nerd fest. We typically do this, but thank you guys so much for tuning in. We hope you guys enjoyed that. Again, last little plug is that you can find so many different kinds of content for you if you'd like. There's a link down below in the prescription in which you can take you to Patreon, have a 7-day free trial, check out all the different kind of content that we have, whether it's Scouted, these main pods, TCP Live. We do rewatches throughout the year, as well as some really fun guests that we're going to try to come on. And of course, we are in the midst of really upgrading this podcast. So if you did want to consider our new tier, the Director's Box, we love you for it. If you did want to do that, you do get an extra bit of content, including this new initiative of my Tactics Corner, which I'm going to be bringing. Hopefully I can get Rohan on for it to be a little bit more nerdy and kind of describe the game on a more detailed level. But also you get monthly phone-ins with me, Rohan, and Alex as well, so we can get to know you guys, actually get to know you on a personal level, which will be really nice. And of course, you guys get voting rights and as well significant acknowledgement as we thank you guys for supporting the channel in a different way. We love all of the support. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Rohan.
Always a pleasure. He smashed it.
Brilliant. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for keeping it Arsenal.
Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. This was one kind of queue the ladies thoroughly enjoyed.
Electrifying. Inspiration.